Several presentations at the recent Cultural Production Conference about art and human rights from slavery to Guantanamo got me thinking about the idea of memorializing while events are occurring and wondering about how to create space for conversation about distressing yet necessarily engaging political concerns. In considering Professor Bishara's presentation on the circulation of an intifada image, I began to wonder, is there a way to draw global attention through media images for the more major political changes rather than reversals and minor policy changes? What, if any, sort of image can highlight the heritage of resistance in Palestine and impact the global and local media and audience in a way to affect real political change and lead to an end of the occupation? Here we have seen the anti-wall movement drawn attention to, as Professor Schatzsnyder pointed out, the impenetrable wall, and that may have been achieved. If violent images sour the opinion and bodily acts of resistance don't impart major change, can any images achieve that? When non-Palestinian photographers stage or take the photographs, what is the intended message? This is not to say that the images alone can or should create change, but how can the level of resistance go back to that of the first Intifada? If that time period was memorialized, would it create a useful space for considering the past, present, and future of the occupation of Palestine? Can memorializing the Intifada bring real change? I spoke to Professor Bishara after her presentation on Intifada images to see what she thought about the possibility of an image of Palestinian resistance that might affect change outside of the images of bodily resistance that she presented, images of more intense resistance that are quickly painted by Israeli and international media as images of violence, and images that blatantly reveal human rights abuses against Palestinians, such as those showing attacks on Gaza that reveal inhumane weapons used by Israel. We spoke of the range of reactions to any image, that throwing rocks is seen as tolerable, normal reaction to many Palestinians and others, and that even that act is seen as intolerable to others. The range of opinions on what is rightful resistance would make it seem difficult to present imagery of resistance that can be consumed universally, retaining an empowered sense of reaction and addressing serious issues in a way that could inspire serious systemic change by oppressors or oppressed. Yes, images of despair and violations of human decency could help the Palestinian cause as a level of atrocity faced against explicit and subtle attacks is highlighted. But can there be a positive image of resistance, knowing that requires an other to resist against, that could improve the global view as the reaction of the oppressed, an image that could lend to a memorialization of events and an ethical framework for engaged witnesses with a committed attitude, as Julian Bonder stressed, to support Agamben's position of witness as one that answers to suffering of others without usurping the place of the other, to make space for the voices of the other, particularly in response to traumatic events, such as the recent and ongoing attacks against Gaza. Would a memorial to provide conditions for new responses, to rethink and reactualize the past as critical transformative space, function if these actions are still occurring? Is the responsibility involved in such acts of memorializing too much while legal and political events are still occurring? Such is the question when considering memorialization of Guantanamo and, I believe, imagery related to the heritage of Palestinian resistance that has urgent relevancy today. What is the role of the journalist documenting such acts as throwing rocks at a wall? Are they giving agency to the Palestinians to act out their bodily performance of resistance? Is there room for the Palestinian voice? Especially following or during traumatic events such as attacks on Gaza, where is the Palestinian voice? When only Palestinian reporters are permitted in an area, could the stories that they tell serve to remove the other and potentially distracting artistic influence? Or does the mentality of performing that relationship of resistance against oppression make images appropriate representations to possibly aid the cause of Palestinian resistance? Where is the space between consuming reported images and taking those images to mark and make a space to enact participatory resolution of conflict? A friend of mine lived in Palestine working on a fair trade olive oil farm and saw olive trees as signs of resistance, as many Palestinian farmers had lost the land that they farmed when the wall went up. Would showing images of planting an olive tree then serve to represent and potentially memorialize Palestinian resistance in a constructive way? Such concern about context and currency given history came up time and time again in readings on representations of the history of slavery in the United States and the impact of that history on race relations to this day. Attempts to refocus the role of slavery in American history are met with resistance, in part due to lack of collective systemic education about the intricacies of the topic. Starting the conversation often starts from ground zero, as Horton explains in his piece about the perils of telling America's racial story. Basic information is rarely consistent, so how to set the groundwork and get into a necessary conversation that gives the concerns of the decidedly diverse victims voice? What if those victims and their descendants don't want to talk about it anymore? Is there space for possible change? Bonder cited a recent obsessive pursuit of memory and memorialization and brought to the fore the question of whether it was appropriate to memorialize something while it's still happening. I believe that memorialization is inherently active and, as such, can serve as a tool to process responsibility as global media consumers, as citizens of involved countries, no matter how unpleasant it is to think about, as visitors to Williamsburg tried to avoid hearing about the legacy of slavery. Dramatic visual events can lend dialogic character to memorial space, embodying truths, culturally diverse and specific, while affirming life and possibilities for a better future for humanity. There must be refocused significance and, with events or narratives that have a historic legacy but current relevancy, determination about how to confront rather than confirm popular assumptions about historic realities that deny the presence of humanity, such as slavery, the occupation of Palestine, or an anomalous zone that houses human rights abuses such as Guantanamo.